You can't be here. My dog is not wanting to cooperate with me right now. Hi my lovelies, welcome back to my channel. I'm Heather and this is the happenings with H.A.P. H.A.P. being my initials. So I figure that why not do a May wrap up? I know it's basically going on mid-June, but I just made this channel and this is how we're kind of gonna roll. That way you can kind of get a better idea of the type of books that I like to read. So for May, everything I read was actually an audiobook. I had tried to read physical book, it did not happen. All of these are audiobooks and they kind of range in genre. Let's go. First up, we have The Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker. I had this on my TBR for a while, so I was finally glad I finally got a chance to read it. This novel follows Briseis, who was Achilles' slave girl given to him by Agamemnon. Achilles is not the good guy in The Silence of the Girls. The novel really explores a side of the Trojan War saga that we don't really get to see. Eyes of the slave women in particular that were captured during all this battle and what they had to go through, whether they were of higher rank like Briseis was, or whether they were the lowest of the low before the Greeks had even gotten to their cities. Just seeing the camps that the Greeks lived in through Briseis' eyes in the day-to-day and just be like, okay, what are these horrible men doing in their day-to-day? And they do some pretty despicable things. I really actually enjoyed it. The writing was quite beautiful and very descriptive. It's definitely not a happy read. Towards the middle of the book, we actually do start getting perspective from Achilles. So we get his point of view as well. And I think that was probably my biggest issue with the book, in that the descriptions and everything in the book of like, okay, you know, it's Briseis' story, it's her point of view and everything else. So it kind of felt a little wrong to have Achilles' point of view, because we see his point of view a lot in many pieces of fiction, in particular Madeline Miller's The Song of Achilles, which I would say is very much a companion piece to this book. If you're kind of going to do a double readathon marathon, these two together would be wonderful. As I said before, I read the audiobook to this one, and Kristen Atherton was the reader and she was quite wonderful. Very well done. I highly recommend. Next up, we have City of Girls by Elizabeth Gilbert. I had been waiting for this one as well for a very long time. If you couldn't notice by the titles, I kind of had a theme going in May. I just kept going in that theme. So City of Girls is a historical fiction novel set in 1940s New York City. It concerns Vivian, who drops out of Vassar College, and she's kind of from a very waspy, upscale New York rich family. And she moves down to New York City to be with her aunt, who actually runs a theater company in Midtown. The aunt's theater is this kind of like rinky-dink little place that just does these kind of showgirly type of shows. So Vivian's kind of thrown into this environment that is brand new to her. She's 19, so she goes a little crazy and just being exposed to this glamorous showgirl lifestyle. Ends up getting into a lot of shenanigans, which would not be appropriate for a woman in the 1940s. Vivian is a very talented seamstress and makes her own clothes, so then she actually ends up making costumes for her aunt's theater production. It all kind of culminates in this production that her aunt's theater company puts on that ends up getting rave reviews and becomes this next big thing. And all of this is happening as this very tense pre-US involvement in World War II. The novel is a first-person narrative, and it's bookended by Vivian explaining all these details of her life to the daughter of one of her best friends. We don't know the relationship between this girl's father and Vivian, but we do find out about it in the course of the story. I would say that if a comparison novel, Taylor Jenkins Reid's The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo would probably be very similar in tone to this. So I'd say if you're looking for tone specific, that would be the best one I can probably think of. What I really loved about this book, I gave this book 5 stars actually. What I really loved about it is that Vivian is not the conventional heroine. She actually does pretty terrible things to people she claims to love and very much absorbs that into her life and tries to be a better person, but also isn't apologetic to who she is. She's very much also the unconventional woman archetype of the American dream that the 1940s in the US represented, which is something I don't think that we actually get to see very often. And it really kind of explores the idea that family isn't necessarily your blood relation, and also that love doesn't have to just be romantic, and also be platonic. And that's something that I don't feel like gets explored a lot. And the fact that it was done in this very nostalgic world of the 1940s of New York City is really cool. So definitely a great one. The next book we have is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. This one was kind of a letdown for me, I'm not gonna lie, and it makes me kind of sad. I was so looking forward to this. There is a bookstagrammer, Paperback Bones, that I follow, who adores this book. I wanted this to be a 5-star read for me, but unfortunately it wasn't. It ended up being 3.5 stars, which isn't horrible. I mean, that's pretty much like, I enjoyed it, but it was fine. Definitely not one I would pick up again. The plot revolves around Richard, who comes from a poor background in California and ends up getting a scholarship to go to a liberal arts college in New England. And while he's there, for one of his requisites, he wants to take ancient Greek because it's something that he had studied in his college in California. The weird thing is that the professor of the ancient Greek course only takes very specific students, and essentially if once you're in that group, you can't take any other classes at the college. So it's this weird kind of insular type of group of characters that are together all the time. And when he inquires about it, he's told that that professor only takes select students based on just an interview. It's kind of led to believe that it's primarily rich students, but he ends up actually getting in, and as one would expect, things don't go quite as well as planned. There's a murder, and then another murder to cover up that murder, and it leads to all these shenanigans. What I didn't really love about it was I just didn't really connect with the characters too much. Richard was an okay character. Henry was pretty interesting. He had a very interesting character arc. The character of Bunny I absolutely hated, so a lot of the plot line concerns him, and I just kind of didn't care. But it was just kind of a letdown. There's just something about it that just, I don't know why, because it really ticked off a lot of boxes that I should like it. For instance, I really loved We Were Villains by M.L. Rio, which has a kind of similar dark academia murder type of a plot. But I actually liked those characters more, so I think that's probably part of it. I don't know, I just didn't connect to it, and I was really bummed that I didn't. And I hadn't really read about what it was about, so it's not like I went in knowing and that was the problem. I don't know, it just didn't appeal to me, and I was kind of upset about it. The last book I read in May was Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda by Becky Albertalli. I really enjoyed this one. This was a really short and sweet coming of age story. The plot of the book is Simon is having this secret kind of, not relationship, but relationship with this boy at his school that he doesn't know who this boy is. He goes by the name of Blue online, and they share emails back and forth, and they're the only ones that know that each other is actually gay. Unfortunately, a bully at the school ends up finding these emails and blackmails Simon in order to help this bully go out with one of his friends. I don't know why everything, that's another thing. I'm not sure why every type of queer relationship story has to have the obstacles in every single book. I loved the relationship that developed between Simon and the aforementioned Blue. It was quite beautiful, and when they actually do get to meet at the end, which, spoiler, they get to meet at the end, it's just, it was so wonderful. I did have issues with the book, particularly with Simon's friend Leah, who just as a friend just treats him pretty awfully. Her whole friend group she doesn't treat very well. I know that the sequel is her own book, but I'm wary to read it just because I didn't really enjoy her as a character. I also had a problem with the fact that, as a spoiler, the bully gets a slight redemption arc to explain away the reason he blackmailed Simon. And I thought that was kind of just a cop-out. No matter what, the bully is framed as this nerd who can't really talk to people well, and that's why he had to do this, but it's still like, you're still being a horrible person. And no amount of what you say is going to really justify that behavior. And I thought that the book snuck it in at the end. And so that bothered me, and that's actually why I deducted about a 0.5 star. Just because, no, you don't do that to people and get away with it and try to explain it away. So that was my biggest problem with the book, but otherwise it was really delightful. And I'm actually very much looking forward to seeing the adaptation of both the movie as well as the show Love, Victor on Hulu, which is supposed to be basically its own sequel, but is not the same sequel that the books have. The books actually have 2 sequels. So there's Leon the Offbeat and The Upside of Unrequited, but this show on Hulu, Love, Victor, doesn't actually cover either of them, I don't believe. So that's interesting. Definitely I'm gonna check it out. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed my May wrap up. It was a lot. It was only 4 books, but it was probably a good 50 hours of actual audiobook listening since that's all I had. So I hope you enjoy and tune in next time. Bye. There is a pigeon. There's a pigeon out there, super loud. Students, you have to... Bikes. They're really fucking stomping. Simon versus the Homo sapien. Oh my god, they keep doing this.